RO Install Part 2. Now that you have confirmed that you received everything, we can now start the installation. Most RO installations will be installed under your sink. Check to make sure you have adequate room. The system can be remotely installed in a basement, but you'll need to purchase additional tubing to install the system remotely. First, we will install the faucet. This installation is for the standard drinking water faucet that will come with your reverse osmosis system. If you've purchased an upgraded Tomlinson air gap faucet, you can find a separate installation video for that on our website. Put the chrome escutcheon on your faucet, followed by the black rubber washer. Set the faucet in the hole you drilled in the sink or countertop. You may want to have someone hold it in the correct position while you secure it from the underside of the sink or countertop. On the bottom side of the faucet, under the sink, you'll install this washer first. If your faucet was placed in a larger hole, you should install the washer bevel side up to help center the faucet in the hole. But in this case, we drilled a 7/16 inch hole, so our washer will be bevel side down. Next will be the star or lock washer. And lastly, we will install the nut and tighten when you have the faucet in the desired position. I like to swivel the neck and install them like this, just because it's easier to get to the handle. From underneath the sink, install your quick connect fitting. Inside the fitting is a tapered fit that will seal the connection without the need of thread tape. Make it hand tight and then give it an additional quarter turn with a wrench. Now we can start our RO installation. First, turn your water off on the cold water side of the existing sink faucet. Once the water is off, open up the existing faucet to relieve the pressure. Next, we will remove the cold water line whip hose that runs up to the existing sink faucet. Most of the time, you can use your hand and one wrench, but in some cases, it may take 2 wrenches to hold the valve while removing the whip hose. It is a good idea to have a towel handy for any water drainage. Once the hose is loose, we will need to install the angle stop feed valve for the RO feed water connection. This angle stop valve will screw directly into the existing sink faucet valve. Once you have the angle stop valve tight, you will see that it can be spun to any position. Now attach your faucet's hose onto the newly installed angle stop valve. Be careful when tightening, not to damage the threads, as the plastic is not as rigid as a metal valve. A John Guest valve can be purchased that is much more rigid, but is not included in the standard system. You can find the John Guest valve at uswatersystems.com. However, in most cases, the valve included will work perfectly fine. Once it's in place, you can shut off the RO line feed valve by turning the handle so it bisects the line connection. With the RO feed valve in the off position, you can now turn on the water valve for the existing sink faucet. Check for any leaks. If you have leaks, repair them now. Next, we will install the drain saddle. The saddle can come 2 different ways. One has a nut, and then there is the quick connect type. First, we'll need to drill the appropriate hole for the saddle connection. If you have an air gap faucet, this will be a 3/8 inch hole. If you are using the standard faucet, this will be a 1/4 inch hole. In this video, we're going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit to provide a 1/4 inch hole in the drain line. Next, drill the hole in the cross pipe. If you have 2 sinks, make sure the hole is in the lateral pipe between the 2 sinks. The size of the hole you will make depends on whether you are using a standard faucet or an air gap faucet. We're using a standard faucet, so the hole will be a 1/4 inch. So now we'll put the saddle onto the pipe. Use your drill bit as a reference to make sure the saddle hole is lined up perfectly with the hole that was drilled in the pipe. Connect and tighten the saddle using the included nuts and bolts. Once it's tightened, you can remove your index tool. Now we can move on to connecting the reverse osmosis system. The blue 3/8 inch tube is your faucet connection. It comes out of the post-carbon filter seen here. With a standard faucet, place the hose into the quick connect until it's tight. Next, we'll attach the tank. The first step is to install the tank valve. If you have a metal tank, Teflon tape needs to be put on the threads to seal it. Wrap the threads clockwise. You will need roughly 4 or 5 wraps. Smooth the wraps with your fingers and attach the valve until it's tight. It only needs to be hand tight. If it doesn't seem tight enough, remove it and add a few more wraps of Teflon tape. Note that for placement of the tank, you can either have it sitting upright or we'll also supply a stand if you need it to lay on its side for space concerns. Find a position under your sink and place the tank. The hose that will be feeding the tank will be coming from the inlet side T-fitting of the post-carbon filter seen here. Attach the hose into the tank valve, making sure it's pushed in all the way. The next connection will be the supply line. It'll be attached to the in port on the sediment filter housing as shown here. Note the molded text that reads in. Take the red 1/4 inch supply line from the in port and push it all the way in the angle stop feed valve. Lastly, we will attach the drain line. Install the black RO system drain line or Brine outline on a Permeate pump system and run it to the saddle we installed earlier. If the saddle is not a quick connect, push the hose through the saddle nut, insert the tube in the saddle, and then tighten the nut hand tight. It can be tightened an additional half turn if desired using pliers or channel locks. The system is now hooked up and can be installed into the cabinet. Now if you have a reverse osmosis system with a Permeate pump, installation will be slightly different. First, we'll install the supply line for the faucet. If for some reason the hoses are ever a different size, you can use the adapter fitting that will come with the faucet. And remember, the faucet line is always going to be connected to the outlet side of your RO unit post-carbon filter. If you're ever unsure, you can look on the post-carbon filter and check to see where the flow arrow is pointing. The arrow will be pointing to the outlet connection on the filter. The next thing we'll do is install the drain line. The drain line is usually black, but in this case we have a red hose. Don't let the color confuse you, as it's how it's connected that matters. On a Permeate pump RO, there's a Brine out port on the pump. If you look, you can see it labeled. Connect your drain line to this fitting and to the drain saddle. Next, take your tank line, which is on the T side of the carbon filter before the arrow. Run this line over to the tank. Lastly, we will install the supply line connection. Take your 1/4 inch supply tube and insert it into your angle stop valve. Once it's put in the valve and pushed in all the way, tighten the collar down. On the back of the RO system is the inlet feed port. The 1/4 inch feed line will be attached here. Now your system is installed. You can find a place for it under your sink. You may want to tie up any excess tubing to keep them out of the way, but it helps to keep the tubing loose so you can easily take your system out of the cabinet for some workspace when you need to change your filters. The only thing left to do is get your system online and running. Advance to the next video in this series to get your RO system operational.